yesterday. Item eight was a hard copy is a way to look up distribution and range. Things like the distribution of the vascular flora of Florida, 1988, by Jones and Coyle. He's dead, but I think she's still alive. But don't spend the big money for it. Talk to me later if you want it. Atlas of the Vascular Flora of Florida by the Society and edited by the legendary Marie Mellinger in our society back in 1984. So those are dated. But what they do is give you an overview or an idea of the distribution of a given species in the state of Georgia, a hard copy. And the last one, Jenicky Somerville, our former shirt lady, has 3 or 4 of the last Marie's publications, but they're not in the best of shape. But I think she'd give them to you for practically free if you paid for shipping. And if you're interested in that, you can email me and I can give you Jenicky's contact information. Item 9 came up last week, and one of the participants found the dictionary of Latin root words and combining forms online and a PDF of it. So I sent y'all the link. That's an excellent little publication that costs $25 to $35, and it's timeless because it's in primarily Latin. So, but it gives, like, the good example I like to think about is so-and-so fruticosa. If you look up F-R-U-T, it means shrub, and that turns out to be true a lot of the time. But then what does DYC stand for? It's almost a joke. Darn yellow composite. That's what Ellen Honeycutt would probably say. And this is kind of like this is almost like the warblers of the bird world. How warblers are so tough to identify? Well, and you're thinking about sunflowers and goldenrods, but technically, it doesn't include what used to be the Aster genus, because they're white or bluish. Let's see what else we can run through this list. It's not mainline stuff. Item number 7, I'm going to go over Cernac and Bonap and USDA a little bit in the presentation. I'm going to try to. You can actually use SERNEC, Cernac, to custom make a list of plants for your county if you're good at Excel. If you're not, you better let me do it. But it takes about an hour and a half to clean it up once you get it. But I went on to Cernac, which is a consortium of 233 herbarium, pulled down a list of stuff for my county, Bryan County, and filtered it for the species and got over 1,000 species collected in the last 200 years. And that's a fourth of the flora of the state of Georgia in my little pitiful county down here on the coast. So you can do that if you know how to filter in Excel. If not, I can teach you how to do that. It's not friendly. I'm not an expert at Excel, but I can make do. Let's see what other items on that email yesterday. Advantages of electronic format over Weekly's product when you do Weekly's products. I think what I'm talking about is the ability to search in Adobe products like Reader or Acrobat. You can that new publication, the new Southeastern Flora, is over 1,800 pages. It practically bogs down my computer. It's so big. So in word searches, you can do an incredible lot of things with the search. All right, now, anybody have any problems with the matching? I'm taking that as, I know one person that had a little problem with the matching, and it's a problem that happened on the last session. It's the difference in the pedicel and peduncle. And I have, through the years, tried to find a satisfactory definition that suited me, and or one that made sense. And I never have really found anything definitive, but it comes down to what I have on the left-hand margin of handout number 6. Handout number 6 is the inflorescences, and one that I will refer to at least once during the presentation. I didn't really worry a lot about it initially because pedicel is not something we see in the aster family. We don't see an individual flower stalk. We see peduncles. And the peduncle, as it says there, can be the stalk of an inflorescence or the stalk of an individual that is a solitary flower. And you don't need the term pedicel at all unless there is more than one flower in that inflorescence. So like the upper right-hand corner of the handout has an umbel, which is typical of the parsley family. In fact, another name for it is the umbelliferæ. Well, there's pedicel there. Talk about that too. Now, I still don't have the term pedicel is irrelevant in this family because there is no individual flower stalk anywhere because they're all in heads. And we'll mention the fact that the aster family is one of the easiest families to recognize when it comes to floral structures and fruit, which includes floral structures. But vegetatively, it's all over the place. So it's hard to tell an aster just from looking at the leaves and the stem. That's what I'm saying. But they sure are well defined otherwise. Acknowledge the fact that Dr. Mincy Moffitt, who just spoke, has just had 2 awards recently. And one of them, actually, I just learned this yesterday, the Georgia Parks and Recreation Association District 7 awarded Mincy the Volunteer of the Year Award for his work on the Connect Protect Garden and at Oconee Veterans Park. Is that right, Mincy?
That is right. Yeah, the Connect to Protect program. That's a state botanical garden thing.
Yes. Now, did that have anything to do with that wonderful video you did on Rus Michaelii?
No, they were completely different. Yeah.
You should have got an award for that. I still think about how good that was. And if anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about, after this, email me and I'll send you the link. It was in the Georgia DNR newsletter. Very, very excellent, which I used to laugh at that term, very excellent. But now I'm using it. But and he also got the State Volunteer of the Year Award. Is that for the same organization?
That's right. The district winners were then submitted to a state body that determined the winner for the state. So yeah, I got both of them. I was really flattered. I didn't know anything about it.
Well, that's good because you're sure not getting paid for what you do. In terms of, I know I used to work for the DNR in Florida. And the only place worse was Georgia. But anyhow, so it's another example of what I'm fond of saying, people don't value what they don't understand, and plants are high on the list, and which is why we're here doing what we're doing. Those that don't know me, I'm Bobby Hadaway, and unfortunately the president of the society right now because nobody else would do it, I think. So it's not a popularity contest, but we should, all right, now let's see. We got everybody, and I was asking if people had trouble with the matching, Lisa. I'm not going to re-go over it, but the usual problem has to do with pedicel and peduncle. And the left-hand margin of handout number 6 clears it up, in my opinion. I think I've cleared it up because I've never found a satisfactory definition that suited me that well, but I think I've captured it there. But in this family, the pedicel is irrelevant because it doesn't exist. Everything is a peduncle, and we'll talk about that when we get through the slides. I'll refer to handout number 6 again, but right now let's talk about the most important handouts. The slide set itself is number 9. That's what the PDFs are. The most important handout that we'll be referring to is handout number 4, which is a key to the keys, where I made little red marks all over Weekly's extraction, or my extraction of Weekly's aster family, handout number 4. It's called Key to the Keys but I'll most likely just call it handout number 4. So try to go. Now, I'm not going to refer to the Hip Dad article, number 1. I hope you read it. Number 2 is intro, and the only reason I gave you that one was so that you could, if you're not familiar with the symbols that he uses in 2 of those pages, then again, the confusing thing about 2 and 5 is that they both have the same cover page, but 2 actually is just the intro information that's on all of Weekly's stuff, and the pages that are most important are in the 12. There's about 1 or 2 pages dealing with symbols. The matching handout was number 3. Related to that, I gave an answer to that. So where? Number 11 and number 12. 12 is just an alphabetical listing of the matching. All right, so handout number, I'm looking at the essentially the tables in yesterday's email that summarizes everything. Handout number 4, I already said was most important. 5 is the 104-page thing that I call the biggie. It's the extraction of the Aster family from Weekly's 2017 publication. People say, well, why didn't you use it to 2020? Well, it just came out this past week, and I'd already got everything keyed into this 2007. There's on one of the slides, I've got a little tilde, and I'll talk about that. I think the first slide, it's not on your slide, but you can annotate it. And the 2000, as far as Georgia's concerned, I don't see a lot of difference in the 2020 one yet. Now the 2020 one, Weekly, any of this 2020 products have got index to the common names, which people like, and I'm liking them more and more because some of the stuff that's going on. The other thing that the people are liking about it, and I like, is it has the symbols as a footer, the little common, uncommon, rare, and where something's native or exotic. That's in the footer of every page past the intro, which is a good feature. All right, number 6, I've already talked about. That's the handout number on the inflorescences that I'll use at least once during the slideshow. Discover Life cheat sheet has nothing to do with presentation. It's just that if you want to use my pictures, that's an easy way to do it. People tell me it's awful to navigate that site. And I've tried to get the author of the site, John Pickering, to fix it, but he's lost interest, I think. Anyway, I've got more pictures than anybody in the world up there on it, but of plants now. Some people beat me. Overview. Okay, the overview number 8 is simply a summary of the whole presentation. I might refer to it a time or two, and I might not. There's stuff in red there pertains to handout number 13. It's the concept that I'm using that I didn't use in the first session. Handout number 8, I just said it's not mainline, but it is useful for an overview of the slideshow, and it's got the red font that ties in with handout number 13, the concept. Now, speaking of, I'm jumping all over on these numbers, but handout 13 is a landscape printed handout. One person last week that I showed it to thought it was confusing. And one person this week has already told me they liked it, but so it's just sometimes more is not better. If I confused anybody yet, don't answer that. Anyway, all right. I think that so the most important handouts for the exercise are the slides themselves. The handout number 4 is most important. Handout 8 is an overview. And 13 is something that some people don't think is necessary. It's a concept diagram that I will refer to from time to time. Now, I've annotated the slides just a little bit, not much, and you'll see that as we go through. All right, I'm about to start to share. All right, this slide is a busy slide. It defines the principles that it should have. It actually All right, the family Asteraceae has another acceptable name, and that's called a Compositae. There are 7 other angiosperm families that have 2 acceptable names according to the International Code of Botanical Nomenclature. That's because, well, first of all, the names that end in ACEAE are according to the standard of naming that's in the code. But the other names, were 8 of them all total, were retained for commerce purposes. Compositae is retained for commerce purposes. The family is the largest dicot family, over 20,000 species. This slide is busy, but basically the older stuff talks around 19 to 20,000, and the newer stuff talks around up to 25,000 species. The largest dicot family and the largest monocot family, in contrast, is the orchid family, with a little, well over 20,000 species there, probably closer to 25 before it's all over with. But now, this link to the Flora of North America is the most useful link. It's most up-to-date information. Don't click on it now. You can, but don't. And but the primary reference I used is this older publication, 1980. And Richard Ware is with us. I think he is. Right, Richard?
Yes, I'm with you.
Now, Richard gave, back in 2012, he gave I think it was at Berry College, I wasn't in it, but a workshop on the Aster family. And in it, he's got, it's still up on the website under workshops and on the Georgia Botanical Society website, some of the materials he used. And I'm using some of those materials now. It says on the slides, but I go ahead and give him credit now. Plus there's another couple of, at least one other picture I used of Richard's. Excellent photography. Now, Teresa's also a part of that, but she doesn't like keying, so she's probably not looking at this, but that's okay. Keying is not for everybody. In fact, it's hard. The vascular flora. Okay, that's what I used, 1980. And that's, I met the man, I thought I was having lunch with God of botany, because he at the New York Botanical Garden, and he died in 92, and I think I had a heart attack, but he was the pivotal botanist in this country for a long time. And I feel very fortunate to have at least met him and had an hour of him to myself. All right, now, as I was saying, I read it this red line because it's new, and tilde means about. So I don't really, from what I can tell, there's not that much difference in what Weekly did in 2017 and 20 with respect to this family. It's still about roughly 507 species in Georgia's flora, or that's 12% of the total flora. There's over 4,000 species, 4,013. And 512 or 507 of them are Aster family. Now, the family has pretty much a cosmopolitan worldwide distribution, mostly temperate latitudes, not tropical latitudes. When they get in the tropics, they turn into trees, like a lot of members of families that have temperate and tropical distributions. It's just the further you go toward the equator, the woodier they get. Florida has more woodies than we do in Georgia. Now, let's see. All right, I think that's probably about it. Flora North America recognizes 35 tribes and 10 different subfamilies. We have about 2 subfamilies and about 11 or 12 tribes in our flora. Okay, so the difference in older and newer is about 25 years. To sum it all up. And are there any questions about this slide? Okay, now, by the way, you can buy the 3 volumes of the Aster family and the Flora of North America, but they're not cheap. And I hear that they're not illustrated as well as some people would like. So we're talking $100 a piece minimum. And I don't own the Aster family yet, and I'm still, the jury's still out about whether it's worth it or not. But anyway, all right, now this slide here, the second slide, is here for 2 reasons. Number one, actually 3 reasons. So when I click on this that's the third reason they're in the bottom left, but I'll get to that. I was trying to make a point that half of this is a good little golden guidebook, and about half of the flora, half of the species in this book is in the aster family. And people have different concepts of what weed means to them, but basically it's a plant that's not wanted at a given time, a plant out of place. And some people's weeds are other people's wildflowers. Right, Richard? Richard.
Right. Yes, I keep mine muted, but yes.
I won't keep that doing you, but that Richard, I think, agrees with that idea. Now, this little plant right here.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, all right. The other one reason I'm showing you this is sometimes things you just don't have to key. And this thing here is really hard to key anyway.
Yes.
Because it's so tiny. And I'll talk about tools that help you with that later on. But this thing is 200 yards from me in my neighbor's yard. And I hope it doesn't get to my yard, because if it did, I can't walk barefoot in the yard.
Yep.
Because it'll tear you up. And the funny thing is, I went down to photographs Saliva sessilis, and that's that plant, by the way, is not in that little book, but it is in this book, Weeds of the Southeastern Turf Grasses by the University.
Physalis. He's talking about physalis.
Yeah. Anyway, this plant by the older name is in this book, Weeds of the Southern Turf Grasses, University of Florida, and so that book and this weed book are good picture books. I don't normally care for picture books that don't have keys in them, but some plants you just learn without having a key. And the more, it's a good one to learn because it's one to avoid. Now, on the cover of this book is the chicory, which is one of my favorite weeds. And then the dandelion, which is my problem in Chicago, and I've got its cousin down here, false dandelion pyropappus in my field. But both the pyropappus and this Taraxacum officinale, the dandelion, have a feature in common. They have a beaked achene. We're going to talk about the difference in the achene and Cypsella later on. But the beaked achene is a projection of the pappus above the achene itself. Now, I want you to pay attention to how long that distance between the achene and the pappus is, because I'm going to show you eventually, if we don't get lost again, I'm going to show you the short achene that we get in when they're young, when they're in this stage. When you see that long one, they're in this stage. But when they're young, the beak is very short. In fact, that can cause problems trying to key them out because it's so hard to see. Any questions on this slide? Okay. Now, all right, this slide here and the next one, this is diagnosis and the next one is description. If you're describing a new species, now this is a description of the family and the diagnosis of the family, but if you're describing a species, you're required to produce a Latin diagnosis or a Latin description. And if you're paying for a translation, you're better off with the shorter diagnosis. A diagnosis is the minimum information needed to separate a group or taxon from its closest relative, or with some group that it might be confused. It's diagnostic information. A good photograph, in my opinion, is both pretty and diagnostic, but that's not always possible. Now, this is nothing highlighted, but basically this is the nutshell information that you need to separate this from other groups. Once you throw out this information here, no other family is going to fall into that category. But this inferior ovary and carpels 2 concept is something we'll refer back to when we try to separate the definitions of an achene and a Cypsella. We call the fruit in this family an achene, but it's technically not. It's not an achene, and I'll talk about why not later on. It's the proper term that nobody really uses is Cypsella. Now, Weekly uses it in the key, and I'll talk about why it's better. It's a more accurate term than achene, but everybody says achene, they know it's really that, Cypsella. Okay. This is probably the most important slide in the whole presentation because it summarizes the whole presentation. It summarizes much of what's on page number 8, the overview to the slides. It's a description, which is everything you know about it. And the most up-to-date description is back at that link. If you click on the link on the first slide, you'll get the Flora North America full family description. And it's probably more than you want to know, but this is capturing it, trying to capture it in a nutshell. We're going to talk about involucral bracts. It's not highlighted. We're going to talk about all these others. What we call the fancy term for head is capitulum, but no, everybody says head. If you look up in the best terminology book that I know available is Harris and Harris for the definition of a capitulum, it's going to say little head. I don't know why they call it, why it has to be the word little as a qualifier, because I just don't know, because it's not, in my opinion, right to say little. But because the head on a sunflower can be more than a foot in diameter, and it's still a capitulum. Now, talking about the cultivated annual. Well, okay, this 50-cent word, syngenesius, didn't used to be around. I don't know why we need it. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about these other features as we're going through, and we'll talk about the different flower types, and we'll talk about the heads that go into the 3 basic heads that are part of that you can get, and then 3 heads that aren't so common. So we're going to talk about 6 different kind of heads in the family, with 3 of them being the ones that most people already know or are familiar with. Maybe not know, but at least are familiar with. The pappus is what the calyx looks like in this family, and it could be absent, but it usually takes the form of bristles, so some kind, or scales or awns. We're going to talk about all of that. Any questions about this busy slide?
Yeah.
None? We'll move on. All right, now, this, I'm going to go ahead and click on something that's not on your slide. Well, that's on your slide, but this is not. The concept number 1 on handout number 13, that's that handout that's an overview, of the important concepts. Now, I've got most of the concepts on that sheet except for the involucre. Indirectly, I have it as number 6, but and colliculus, which is a kind of the involucre. But so that red line is not on your slide. You can note it if you want to, but it's just a keying in of a handout with the slide. And at the end, we'll talk about plant analysis. And one of the first features that you look at when you try to identify any plant, not just an Aster family plant, is the aspect or lifestyle, its habit, which is not the same as where it grows. That's the habitat. So the habit is what, in the previous slide, the word, they were herbs, shrubs, trees, and vines, including woody vines, lianas. Well, trees are mostly tropical. This family is mostly temperate in its latitudinal distribution, not tropical. And the few ones that are in the tropics tend to be arborescent or tree-like. But in our flora, we've got herbs and shrubs, and we have annuals and biennials and perennials. And these 2 that are on this slide are annuals and biennials, and the next slide has perennials. Now, so basically, herbaceous is a prevailing term here that you have to keep in mind, with an exception on the next slide. The annuals go overwinter as seeds. They do and they die after 1 season. And a biennial, these are hypothetical drawings, and they're not composites either. They look more like mustard, even though it's hypothetical. Lyman Benson did them. He's excellent textbook down here. But a biennial takes 2 years to produce seed, and the first year it looks like you see here a rosette. You don't always see a rosette, but when you do, that's an indication that it might be. And you don't see any bolting like you see in the second year. It's an indication it might be a biennial. But they take 2 years to reach maturity, and then they die. This is the perennial, and it's the same concept, but except a perennial lives 3 or more years and dies often to the ground typically, and may or may not have a rosette, but dies to the ground at the end of the growing season. The most important term on this sheet is right here on this slide is caudex, C-A-U-D-E-X, one of the matching exercise slides. And it's a persistent, often woody base of a herbaceous perennial. So the idea is that this over time becomes hardened and recognizable in the caudex. Now, it may take you a while to see a good example of a caudex, but the plant that I'm going to mention later on, Palifoxia intragrifolia, which is not in the slideshow directly, is a good example. And some people, I think in the early beginning, Lisa, you didn't hear this because, but lots of folks tried the first exercise and a few folks tried the second exercise. And I'm going to go ahead and say it now. I'm talking about the last 2 handouts, 14 and 15. They both come out to be the same plant, Palifoxia. And in Georgia, if you go to the biggie handout number 5, that's electronic only, a 104-page one that I hope people don't print out, at least don't feel like they have to print out. There's only one species of Palifoxia, Palafoxia in Georgia, and it's intragrifolia. And it has a habit of being a half shrub to it could be as much like this, a herbaceous perennial. And weekly in handout number 4, which is, I suppose we could go ahead and look at that right now. If you pull out handout number 4, let me back out of this and pull it up. I think I've got it. Yeah, right here. Can you see that on my screen?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. I don't know if Ed has joined us or not yet. Tried to. I didn't see any invite for him. But now, all right. Now, if you go to the shrub route, takes you to key A. If you look down at key A, look at the choices. The last one is what?
Palifoxia.
Palifoxia. That's right. Now, and by the way, let's look at key A. Handling a key is kind of like cheating. You want to go in and make notes on the thing so you don't have to look it up. If you don't know that Bacchus here is saltbush, you need to write that in. Ampilaster is the fancy new name for the old Asteraceae, the only real big viney member of its.
No.
Okay. So what I'm saying is, if you don't know what Ampilaster is, that's okay. But write in what it used to be, Asteraceae. It's a woody vine, and it's about the only, can't be confused with anything else. Chrysoma there's only one species in the southeast, and it's the name is Pauciflocculosa, but who can spell that? So just call it woody goldenrod, and that's what it is. Borichia, you want to see that? Go to the coast. Sea daisy, and it's the only one species in our flora. Then Iva has 4 species in it, of which one of them is marsh elder. So what I'm trying to tell you to do is 2 things here. Annotate your key. You can do it in Adobe or Adobe Acrobat. I didn't realize you could do it in Adobe until Steve told me. Or you can, if you take a hard copy of these 12 pages and print them out, you can do you can mark it up however you want. And if they're rare, you want to make a note about that too. But now let's go back. This keys to key A. Leaves in this are opposite in Palifoxia, at least below. The lower nodes are more accurate than the upper nodes. And the head, is we're going to see in the slideshow, is disciform. And if you go down, there's a few number of flat-headed arrangements that call Palifoxia. If you happen to think the plant, and you could, is a perennial instead of a shrub, you go to the second lead of couplet number 1, heads opposite, and they're disciform, you go to key B. So let's go down to key B. And it's okay. Key B. Pappus, and I'd have to tell you, like I did on the handout 4 and 5, that the pappus is scales, and that would take you to the second lead in key B. And then the receptacle I also tell you is naked. That takes you to the first number 10, and then you drop over to the next page. And then with knowing that from reading the handout number 4 or at least number 5, that you've got 4 to 10s. Actually, the truth is it has more like 12 scales, but it keys to the first couplet, lead of the couplet. And if you'll see later on that there's a few number of them in the head, and therefore it will key. That's probably it again. All right, anyhow, all right, okay. The bottom line is a real big punchline here, people, if you haven't figured it out already. Wheatley has done a good thing. He's double keyed this plant. He keyed it in the shrub category, he keyed it in the herbaceous perennial category. And double keying is always a good idea, especially when there's a trait that's questionable. Or it says running out of time upgrade, okay.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. What I was doing was showing the slideshow, and I had stopped to, we were going through that. And I was just trying, the point that I made when we got cut off was that I was trying to make the idea, the point that whenever a good keyer does what they do, they double key. And that's the point. So let me get back to the slideshow. And get back up to, all right, now, so what this slide, the previous slide had to do with concept wise, and on the handout number 13,
Teresa,
concept is
I
plant.
don't guess I could get you to fix
All
me
right.
a cup of coffee, could I?
Okay, yeah. All right. Now, all right, this slide.
I should have. I didn't know if it was going to be gone that long. They're back on.
I think, Richard, we hear you talking to Teresa. That's fine, but get us some coffee too while you're at it.
Okay.
Tell her to get everybody a cup of coffee.
Yeah, I don't.
Teresa, I had my
2 cups and I had 3 this morning. So y'all are making me well. I've been sick for 2 weeks and I feel better than I felt in 2 weeks. I don't know what's going on.
It's all these smiling faces that are looking at you, Bobby.
I guess so. And like I already said, I got more face than most. Now, this handout, this slide here ought to be labeled concept. Well, it is. Actually, go ahead and do this. This is not in your concept 2A through 2I on the handout number 13. And that ought to tell you a lot, people. That ought to tell you that this slide, or this concept, is probably one of the most important concepts, because on those 6 pages of the Key to Keys handout number 4 that I was just looking at, this concept appears at least 9 times. So it's very important. Mastering this concept gets you a lot of mileage in the keys to the asters genera, which is what we're looking at. Now, I've underlined receptacle here because I wanted to emphasize that's the name of the theme here. Is a receptacle naked like the photograph, or is it chafy like the drawing? The old name for the bottom plant down here is Chrysanthemum leucanthemum. Now its new name is called Leucanthemum vulgare. Vulgare just means common. And I taught the Latin, and sometimes it's Greek Latinized, but commonly Oxide-daisy. And if you look at these, you know what I need to do? I need to go up here and click on this spotlight, and you can see a little better. Now, can you see that a little better?
Yes, sir.
Okay, some thumbs up will do sometimes, but that's good. All right, now let me get this snot off my screen. It's not really snot, but anyhow, all right, down here is a receptacle, up here is a receptacle. In this naked, N-A-K-E-D head, there's no bracts anywhere in these tubular flowers. There must be 100 tubular flowers even in that section. And these are ray flowers on the periphery. That's a radiate head. We'll talk about that. But there's no bracts coming up in between these tubes like they are here. These tubular flowers have bracts all across. And it can be chafy, like a papery-like or green-like, leaf-like structure like a bract normally is. Or in the thistle group, they tend to be bristles instead of the chafe that we'll see in a moment. So anyhow, let's see. Okay, so very important concept here in the keys to the composites, knowing what kind of head. It's pretty well apparent that naked is the norm, but a lot of them are chafy. Now, sunflower is an example that we're going to see in a minute. This is a Western thing that's sunflower-like in its way it's put together. A chafy head, and it has, you can see almost a shield-shaped bract there that actually is the name is pale, a common name, or paleo. Adonea becomes plural. It's kind of chaff. And I said in the thistle family, instead of having something that looks like a shield, you'll have bristles. But in both cases, it gives a rough appearance to the head. In Liatris and Carphophorus, two color-wise similar species, and I chose the Carphophorus has chafy heads, whereas the Liatris, none of them do. And I chose this species because it's in South Georgia and North Florida, and it's Pseudo-Liatris. With a name like that, you expect it to look like Liatris. But I remember Hugh Norris and Carol, we were playing out in the field one time keying, and we were fooling with this. We thought that what we had was a Liatris, but we didn't look closely in the head to see that they were chafy. And so we messed up because we didn't know this concept well enough to apply it, or at least we didn't dissect it like we should have. Now, there's a good old sunflower, and this slide I'm going to take more time than I normally would take on it because I want to talk about something but first let's talk about the receptacle. And in the receptacle here, we're continuing with the receptacle concept, and you can see inside of this radiate head, that we'll talk about what radiate means in a minute, is a bunch of like you see here, chafe or bracts or pales, and they're embedded in between the flowers. And later on, we'll see a slide that shows these separated with a pale still sticking to one of them. Here's a receptacle. Here's the filaries down here at the bottom, collectively known as the involucre. I didn't make that point earlier, and I didn't talk about peduncle down here either. I guess I could back up and do that. Peduncle, collectively, the filaries are called the involucre. Okay, now back up. All right, now, any questions about that? Okay, what I'm going to do is tell you now, this thing here, Helianthus angustifolius, if you were trying to key that out, and you live in, it's actually all the way up in the mountains, but it's common in the south and it's in the Piedmont. But Weekly compares this with two other species in the Keys. There's one that's called, in the coastal plain, it's called Helianthus floridanus. Let me back out of this and go into the website. I've got, let me get rid of that page. Oh, I know what I need to do. I'm sorry. I think I can, Cernak, all right, let's go here. All right, this is Helianthus angustifolius USDA, and I didn't emphasize it earlier, but this USDA site is out of date, but it's still very useful. Now, if I double click on that and bring it up, you'll see that it's going to eventually show Georgia with a distribution for angustifolius that goes, can y'all see that?
Yep.
Okay, it's kind of, look how incomplete Georgia is. Look how complete the coastal plain and Piedmont of Carolina is, and North Carolina, and look how complete Florida is. Doesn't that tell you something? It tells you that Georgia is not well represented on a USD map, outdated or not. Florida is really based on specimens, whereas Georgia is not necessarily based on specimens, but it's certainly not well populated. And I'll bet you it's in more counties. Well, heck, it's in my county, Bryan County, right down here. It's not even, and there's no USDA indication of that. Now,
it's in Houston County also, and
yeah,
it's shown in white.
Yeah, so what I'm telling you, the fact that USDA doesn't have it populated the way it should is not all USDA's fault, even though the criticism is they're out of date. But the guys in South Florida or in Florida have most of these dots are based on specimens validated at the University of South Florida down here. But let me go up here and go to home. And this is Bonap, which is a quick way to get at distribution. Let's see, if you get to the list by genera, and then you get the option of the color key. The color key can be confusing until you get used to it. In fact, Richard helped me get this straight. If something appears in the state, it's going to be green, but if you have county information, it's going to be that color green. We're going to look at simulans, which is a species that looks like Helianthus angustifolia. But okay, now I know I'm way off from the slides, but I'm bringing up concepts that I would eventually get to anyway. But this color is adventive. That means weakly naturalized. Now let's go back over here and put in. Let's look for Helianthus, and I'm going to type in Helianthus. That's better than. Uh-oh, I messed up. This thing's in my way. You can't see it, but I've got this toolbar in my way. Get it out of the way now. Okay. Lianthus. All right, now if I click on Helianthus, and then I'm going to quickly get to similans. All right, down here. All right, now. Oh yeah, that's okay. Now, what I got here is it shows that in this is not the one I wanted to see. Let me back out. I don't think I did something right. It's not letting me do it. Wait a minute. I know what I got to do. Okay. Let me try that again. I thought I got a better map than that. But the bottom line is it's showing adventive colors for Georgia, and the origin is supposedly in Arkansas and Louisiana, but this is Helianthus simulans. Now I tried to get Linda to put it in the, let's go back to USDA and see if we can get her better. Let me type in Helianthus simulans. That's already here. All I gotta do is click on it and hit go. And it's gonna bring up simulans. And what they do is show that they know it's collected in Georgia, but they don't in Alabama, but they don't know where. But if Bonap had done like expected it to do, and I got a better representation of that before, and I don't know why I can't now. But bottom line is simulans and angustifolius and floridanus. Let me replace this with floridanus. All right, go. Floridanus is going to be coastal plain. Even though you say, gee, why are you using an out-of-date thing? It's because it's still got good information. No, Floridanus is a coastal plain species. Most of you living up in this part don't have to worry about that it being Floridanus. And I've got simulans in my yard, and I've got it down the street, but it's adventive. So there's three species that look alike: angustifolius, floridanus, and simulans. And angustifolius, with a name like Angust in Latin, that means narrow leaf. And Linda talks in her book and in Weekly's Keys about it. They use the term centimeter or inch, but basically if it's narrower than a centimeter, it's angustifolia. If it's wider than that, it's the other two species. But bottom line is, the real problem is when you get into Biggie handout number 5 with trying to figure out which of these three sunflowers it is. And I think we can go back to here now, trying to figure out which of these is. When you go to the Biggie handout number 5 and Weekly has all three of them double keying. He has them keying under heads dark and heads yellow. So, and again, that double keying concept is useful. I probably lost everybody on that, and I'm sorry if I did, but what I was trying to do was showing you how to use distribution as a tool to help you. And if you're in North Georgia, you don't have to worry about any, when you're trying to figure out if it's Angustifolius or the other two, it's not going to be Floridanus and it's not going to be Simulans. So, but if you're in the coastal plain down here and you might, or even a little bit of the Piedmont, you might have to try to, based on those maps, we might have to look at it. Now, of course, Weekly's maps are, he doesn't have county stuff, but he does have distribution maps for many of them. I probably lost anybody, but is there any questions? Lisa's smiling. I don't know if she's laughing with me or at me, but anyway. Oh, that
Well,
must be.
it's all pulling HipDad. You're using HipDad.
That's Billy. I didn't pay Billy to say that, but that's true. HipDad is such an important concept. A lot of us use it routinely. And now at least I realize what that was. That's your standard picture. That's good. But anyhow, so HipDad is important because distribution is important. And if you think you found a rare plant, you probably haven't. Now I've seen Ruellia noctiflora, which is not really rare, but you don't see it because it blooms during the night and the early morning hours. But that's one plant I did find on the roadside. But most time a roadside plant is not going to be a rare plant, especially when the habitat's been disturbed. Now, this slide and the next two other slides are about lookalike families that have heads in them that don't normally have heads. And Eryngium is the poster child plant for this. There's about 6 species in Georgia. And this is one of the bigger ones when it comes to the head. They do have some bracts, but there's not much of an involucre here, but there are some bracts down here. But it's got 2 stigma style complexes up here too that really make you think it might be an aster, but it's really not. Now take handout number 6, that handout that I'll probably not mention after now. And I bragged on my definition of peduncle and pedicel for those who are in the early session part. But in the upper right-hand corner of handout number 6 is your typical umbellifery inflorescence, an umbel. Imagine handout number 6, everybody. Imagine if you were looking at that upper right and consider that there's no pedicels, then you'd have this. If the flowers in the upper right-hand inflorescence, the umbel, were sessile, no pedicel, you'd have a head. And so that's what happens in this member of the parsley family. Now there's this slide and the next two are like the asters, and they have 2 acceptable names. The Apiaceae is a proper name. The umbellifery is a name of commerce that was retained. That's true of this, the Labiatae and the Lamiaceae, and that's true of that's here, Labiaceae or Labiatae, which I added in red. That red word is not on your slide. But the point being that all 3 of these look-alike types happen to have 2 acceptable scientific names for the family. But the pea family has the legume, well, the legume family or pea family has the old name Leguminosae retained from commerce, and the name that fits the international code of botanical nomenclature with the HEA ending. Now, these 2 members of the genus Dahlia, this one is common in the coastal plain, summer farewell. I don't know how far north it goes without looking. But this thing here has been reported for Georgia, but nobody knows where. But it's Missouri or western, but it has a receptacle that looks sort of like a coneflower, which is some of the aster family have these conical receptacles that are not flat or convex, they're way up. And it almost looks like a spike, but this is Dahlia purpurea, purple prairie clover. And by the way, clover in trifolium in the legume family also has something that looks like a head, but they're not members of the aster family because they don't have cypsella and some of the other features that we talked about back on the description slide. Any questions?
Dahlia carnea and that also look very similar to that we have down here that I think you got up in Georgia too.
We got it too, and that's a good point, Billy. I'm not paying him for these good remarks, but that's true. All right, that is absolutely correct. Now my slide won't advance, and I've learned how to fix that.
Bobby,
Yes, ma'am.
would you mind backing up to the Eryngium real
My-
quick?
What am I doing? What?
She said
Would you
backing up.
mind backing up
Yes,
to the Eryngium?
yes, go ahead. I'm there. I got two leases here, but yes.
Yes, I apologize. My
That's all right.
computer.
You
I
don't,
like looking at it on my home computer. It's much
yeah,
better.
that's fine.
So
Apologize. You helped us.
um,
We'll do
is
anything.
is can you point out if you are just starting to look at the Eryngium and you wanted to confirm it was not Asteraceae,
Right.
can you show us what you're seeing there?
Well, what you would do, the easiest way would be to wait till you saw it in fruit.
Yes.
Because you'd have you wouldn't have a caryopsis, you wouldn't have a Nakeen or Cypsella, you'd have something that had more seeds in that, and probably they normally have a schizocart fruit that splits into mericarts, kind of like a merry-go-round type thing, and so that would tell. Now the other thing that would tell you would be, here's the thing, you'd have to have a dissecting scope, but all right, here's the thing that I'm glad you did that, because see these two styles of stigmas, they look sort of like what you would see in the Aster family. But if you could dig in and look at the stamens in the Aster family are connate, they're fused together. But all I'm talking about really is almost really close work with the kind of tools that I'll point out toward the end that you need to do that. This one on the left is still, and they're both, this is a sectional view of the one on the left. And the truth is it would be easier when they were in fruit, but the fact it looks like they might even be bracts in the head on this one, but the stamens you're going to see in a minute are almost they're not unique. The lobelias have it too, fused anthers, but connate anthers that goes by the fancy term syngenesius. And so what I'm answering your question is stamens and the fruit would help you. Okay. That's very good though, because this one of the three is the most difficult to tell. All right, and then all the Monardas have this head-like deal with the bracts, and that kind of looks deceptive. Now these, you can see the kind of stigma styles and stamens do not have the same problem we just had with the Eryngium. Excuse me. But and all the flowers are zygomorphic in this head too, this sort of head. The fruit is a nut type fruit in the mint family. So that the worst one would be, as Lisa pointed out, the Eryngium. Now, all right, this is an important slide. I won't refer to handout 6 again, probably. So, excuse me, I think I'm going to have to do another cough drop. I apologize for all the problems we're having. I get this post-nasal drip that makes me want to cough, and I've quit taking the blood pressure pills, which made me cough, and there's too many variables in this experiment called life. All right. Nancy, you still there? Well, I don't blame him. All right, so, okay, now
Yeah, I'm here.
okay, good, okay.
You don't see me?
I guess that's fine. I could have clicked down, I guess, and fast. But anyhow, all right. So this slide is, probably 25% of the slides are new in this presentation, and I had others from when I taught flora or the taxonomy class at Georgia Southern. But we got 3 structural types of flowers, Florida. The first is showing, and you're probably seeing them all right now, but the first one is the one I'm emphasizing here. And structural is there underlined for a reason, because if I started talking about sexuality and symmetry together, we could figure up half a dozen more kind of flower types. Now I'm talking heads now, but this will lead us into a head discussion later on. It'll come to a head, so to speak. But But anyhow, this first of the three types of flowers I'm going to show is this disc flower. And the disc flower has radial symmetry, actinomorphic symmetry, regular symmetry, all the same thing. All right, and that's in the disc of a radiate head. Whereas this on the right is called a ligulate or ray flower. Heads that have only that are called ligulate or liguliflorous heads. Imagine what would happen on this flaring part that comes up. There's a tube down here like this tube, but the flaring part is flat and got sometimes 4 or 5 or 3 to 5 teeth on it. Imagine what it would be like if you took this flat thing and folded it out, the ligule or tongue, that's what ligule means, and folded it into something that looked like that. So this is considered bilateral symmetry. That's or zygomorphic irregular symmetry, whereas this is radial symmetry.
Bilateral.
Yes. Anyway, this, by the way, it says 5 and 4 teeth. If you were keying out Coreopsis, which is tick seed, it would say in the keys, it would say some of them have 5, some of them have 4. And so that's why that's written the way it's written. There are other plants like that, but in the family. But anyway, the third type is not bolted on purpose. Not bolted on purpose. And let me take a swig of water here. The reason it's not bolted is that kind of flower that it is not common, almost rare in our flora, or rare, flat out rare in the southeastern United States. It's called a bilabiate, meaning two-lipped, and that's true of the central florets. Floret is a term for diminutive of flower. So the central flowers or florets have a two-lip configuration that's not illustrated here. We'll see it in a moment when we talk about the kind of head that makes up. Okay. So I don't have it in here because it's not something you'll see again in our flora, and it's in Chaptalia, it's sunbonnets. Excuse me. At least that's productive cough. Now, we're looking at the one on the right, ligulate array flowers. This is dandelion. And Walter Judd did a good job of photographing this down in the University of Florida. He's retired, but he's now. Remember back on slide number 2, I looked at the cover of that weed book and showed you the very long beak. Look at the beak here. See how short that beak?
Class. I'll call you back later.
The beak here is very short. I don't know, we're getting some background noise and somebody needs to mute the thing, but all right.
Oh,
now,
sorry. This is Beth. I was on, I turned onto the phone. My sister just called me and said Biden has won.
okay, all right, so
Yay!
all right, let's don't get political here. I'm not saying I told some people I wasn't going to talk.
Thank you, Beth.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
thank you, Beth. Yeah, that's good. If you're a Democrat. Now, I'm not supposed to say what I am because I'm the president's not supposed to.
5-1, Marcia.
All right.
Yeah, Beth,
Back
got a
to
cough.
all right, right here we got, see how short this is? Remember how long that beak was back on slide 2? When I tried to
Wow.
key this thing sometimes, or key it, you say, why would you key something? I want to key to see if it works, the key works. And so out here in my yard, I've got the false dandelion, Pyropappus, desert chicory, for a stupid name to have desert in my yard. But anyhow, I've got it has the same problem. When they're young, the beak is short, but as it gets older, the beak gets quite long. So it is beaked. I've been unable to find what percentage of the Aster family is beaked and what percentage is not. But I can tell you the majority is not beaked and some of them are beaked. But here, 1980, Cronquist says that he even flat says rarely, in his description of this species, Cronquist says rarely beakless. What he's saying is that a beak doesn't develop in this, and I've never seen that. Of course, he looked at a lot more than I did. Now, questions. By the way, concept A through 3D on handout number 13. If you take a quick look and see that it appears in a number of couplets in those. Let me get some water. Does everyone know what I mean when I say couplet? Because every dichotomous key is made up of couplets, and each one's called a lead. And you try to keep it to two choices, otherwise it ain't dichotomous. Now, but anyway, couplets 3A through 3D are on there, and that means it appears that many times in those 6 pages. So it must be an important concept for you to master that. And I would normally go back and start looking at handout number 4 and point out examples, but we've lost so much time, I want to not do that. Okay, this is one of my favorite
I'll
slides.
call you back.
One of my
Call you
favorite
back.
slides from Judd. And he's got, we've got 4 flowers here that are tubular showing. Let's get rid of the bad news first. The bad news is, let's deal with this, something I've been putting off, trying to tell you about the business of a Cypsella versus a Akene. Technically speaking, the Akene in this family is not an Akene, because in reality, even though Harris and Harris don't tell you this, an Akene is developed from a superior ovary with 1 carpel, 1 modified leaf.
Yeah.
In this family, what we're calling a lookalike, we're calling a Akene, is really a Cypsella. There's another slide that shows it better than this. But in the Aster family, the fruit comes from an inferior ovary. Look here. See those 2 sepals that look like sepals, and instead of that's the calyx. In the Helianthus, it lends you to think that it might be a primitive because it still looks like what a calyx is supposed to look like. In the Aster family, unlike the true Akene, this comes from an inferior ovary, not a superior ovary. And this is a 2-carpellate situation in the Aster family, not true of the other situation you have Akene. And you say, how do you know it's 2 carpels? This looks like 1, and you're right. But up here is the proof of the pudding. 2 styles, 2 stigmas show it's a 2-carpellate ovary down here. So the technical term Cypsella that Weekly uses is really the correct term, but everybody knows we call them Akenes because they look like Akenes. Now, I'll show it at least one more time because I'm working on the repetition principle that eventually gets redundant. But so I'll show a slide of that at least one more time, something similar. But now, notice I'm gonna, instead of me telling you, somebody look at the 4 flowers and tell me which one looks odd. All right, it's the one on the right, because the one on the right has a pale or chafe piece stuck to the flower, which I'm glad he did it, because it shows what happens when they dissected this out of the head and made the picture of it, it kept, either accidentally or on purpose, Walter Judd kept this pale in there. But these other guys show the pappus looking just like the drawing over here, doesn't it? If it weren't for the fingers, it looks like Richard Nixon sticking his hands in the air. See that? So, anyhow, that's a good slide. Now for using what we learned about the flower types to try to understand the heads. All right, there's 3 main types of heads in our flora, and this asterisk trying to tell you that there must be something else. There are 3 others that we're going to mention now, but talk about in a moment. They're not common. These are the common types of heads in our flora. We just got through talking about sunflower that had a radiate head. That's this one. It has a combination of disc flowers in the center and ray or ligulate flowers on the periphery. That's the radiate combination. Now, normally the flowers in the center are perfect, and the ones out here are female or sterile. And then there's all disc flowers like we're going to see in Liatris next. And there's ligulate flowers like dandelion and chicory. Okay. But there's a whole lot of examples of radiates. the nice thing, and I was going to forget to say it, I'm afraid, but I'm going to say it now. Practically all of the Liguliflorae subfamily, which is a subfamily of the two we got, have milky sap. That really helps. That really helps you find it. A lot of them, if not practically everyone, has milky sap associated with it. Now, that reminds me, I was talking about one thing I forgot to talk about back when I was talking about the habit. How can you tell an annual from a biennial perennial? And I hate to go back and talk about something I forgot, but I thought about it because the plant I'm talking about has milky sap. I just assumed for years that if you can pull it out of the ground easily, it's an annual, but that's not necessarily true. But sometimes an older plant will have the rosette dark colored. It's like it's overwintered. But I've got a terrible weed in my field. It's called Asteraceae granovii. It's a hawkweed. That's common name. Another common name for it besides hawkweed is queen devil. Queen devil. And it's a devil because it's a weed, but it's a fibrous rooted perennial. The drawing we saw had a tap root, but a fibrous rooted perennial after a rain, you can pull it out of the ground pretty easy. So the reason that brought that to my mind is when I pull it out of the ground, I get milk all over my hands because it's in the Liguliflorae. Sorry about that. All right, that was just to remind me about the receptacle being on all three. Now, this is an example of this the discoid head, Liatris, and these bracts are squaros, which means they come out and bend down. And it's disc flowers only, pretty genus. These are called collectively, or individually they're called filaries. Collectively, they're called the involucre, which are both were terms, I think, on the matching. Now we've got two plants that have disc-like flowers. This is the saltbush, the Baccharis. It's common in Georgia. And its inflorescence, it really is made up of, what you see here is just pappuses, thousands of pappuses, thousands of capillary bristles. And this is a female. The male has stamens and it has a yellow color to it because of the pollen. But dioecious is the exception in this family. But this genus is known for that. This is a plant, if you're North Georgia, you might see it. It's common further north and a weed in Chicago. But these bristles are part of the filaries that are responsible for the guy coming up with the concept of Velcro. So Arctic minus or burdock. The leaves can be huge, like 2 feet and 3 feet. I mean, they're just can be quite large. But the bottom line is both of these have the disc flowers only in the heads. Now, I put this in because I wanted you to see, this is a mile from my house. We have flowers and we have fruit in the same photograph. These are older and nothing but capillary bristles are showing, but these heads haven't reached that stage yet. This used to be in the genus Eupatorium, but the head, among other things, the head is the receptacle is so convex, not a cone head like we saw in that dahlia, but so convex that that's one of the reasons you can separate it out from Eupatorium. So the head, instead of being the convex like we've seen so far, if you dissected the flowers out, it would be conical in this flower. Now, these are Western things, but they're both radiate heads with ray and disc flowers. But this really, it's a cultivated plant, but it shows better than anything the disc flowers. You know, it's funny how not every feature is well illustrated on every species. But Zinnia, the genus, has these look like tubular, they look like flowers. I mean, let's face it, these disc flowers here and here are so small, they don't. But of course you say, well, you're closer up. Well, that's true, but they still look like tubular flowers. They're still like tubular flowers. Now, another thing about Zinnia, even though it's cultivated, is that these bracts are become parchment-like, and they last a long time, and I suppose that's probably why it would be part of a dried arrangement. But I couldn't help but use this example because I can think of no better way to show you what a real tubular flower might look like in its easy to recognize form. Now,
Berlinderia is also like that, right?
what's that?
Berlinderia,
I didn't hear the genus.
Berlandria,
Berlindiera. No,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
think.
Berlinderia.
Okay, Berlindiera might have. Oh, you're talking about the persistence.
Yeah, because it leaves little, almost like a dried flower head once the centerpiece
Okay,
falls.
right. Okay. Well, I'm glad you mentioned Berlindiera because in the key 5, I've wrote it in. It's not even included in fact, in handout number 4, look at the top block. Note, Chaptalia, Stokesea, Berlindiera are not yet keyed and may be others.
Yeah.
I was going to mention that. Boy, I'm not paying you, but you're doing a good job there, Billy.
Sorry.
But I was going to mention that, but let's do it now. One of the things that I had said the other day, and I did it, and I'm saying it now, is that when I emailed Weekly and said, how come these aren't in there? He said it's a work in progress, pardon our mess, which is his standard answer. But I came back and I said, if you like, I could write your keys for you and you could use them or not use them. And I put these things that are missing in, but he said he didn't say anything. So I assume I either offended him or he doesn't care. But the point is, and I don't care either. The nice thing about getting old, you don't really care, but of what people think. But anyhow, I don't know. He's probably not got thin skin, but I tried to help him put these in. But Berlindiera is not in the key. The Stokes Aster is not in the key, and Sunbonnets is not in the key. Yeah. But now. I didn't take this picture of the dandelion, but it's here to illustrate a ligulate only head, liguliflorous head, and got milky sap. I can't say for sure chicory has milky sap or not, but this is one of my favorite pictures. I took back in the 70s, and it was still good enough to use. But the dark area is the syngenesious anthers, the fused anthers that we're going to talk about, and that's something that Eryngium wouldn't have. Now here it is. A 50-cent word for it wasn't in. It's in Harris and Harris, but it wasn't in the older books. And I don't know why we needed it, because 2 fundamental terms that you need to know that were in the matching was adnate and connate. Adnate, adnation and conation. Adnate, just like adhesive, is when something sticks to something that's not like it. Like when the stamens stick on the petals, that's adnate. But in other words, fusion of unlike parts. When you have fusion of like parts, the term connate is used. So connate anthers wasn't good enough. They had to come up with syngenesious anthers. But in my older terminology books predating Harris and Harris, there was no such word. Now, all right, here comes the plant, the head. All right, this and the next 2 other kind of heads were the 3 uncommon heads. In fact, let's stop it. Look at the concept handout number 13. Look in the smack dab in the middle of that landscape page, and you see number 4 concept. Number 4 is the type that we have already talked about, the typical 3 types of heads. The radiate, ligulate, and florate heads. There's just many times that appears in the key. That's the norm. That's the common. Those 3 are common, and they're not marked in red on the overview slide. Now, number 5 through, I should have labeled it 5A, but 5 all the way down to 5E is what we're going to be talking about now. And this particular one is handout of 5E, Chaptalia. Now, I've already spilled the beans on that handout a moment ago when Billy brought up about the Berlindiera, which I think the common name is green eyes.
Right.
Yeah, and Chaptalia sunbonnets All right, Septalia is in that list too on the top. It's not, Weekly does not use in any of his keys in the 2017, and my best guess on the 2020, never uses this word trimorphic. And that's probably why this plant, Chaptalia, is not keyed out in Weekly. He's included it in the treatment, but he doesn't key it out. And surely, if he didn't know it, he knows it now because I emailed him about it. But what I asked him to do was he needs to put in the beginning of the key, like he does sometimes, so-and-so and so-and-so genus not yet keyed. He doesn't do it. And, okay, it's work in progress, but he still needs to tell everybody that. There's probably others I haven't figured out. I haven't had time yet. I don't know how many other genera aren't in the key yet. But in fact, I guess we'll put it off. All right. Now, if you were keying this plant out in Wonderland Hanson's third edition, it's the Guide to the Vascular Flora of Florida. It had heads trimorphic, meaning 3 types of flowers. You have this is a radiate head, but it's not like anything I described earlier because the central flowers are 2-lipped, bilabiate, like I said on back on the flower types. The plant is not rare in our flora, but this type of head is rare among our flora.
Huh.
All right. Now, the thing that's not obvious is that there's 3. Why is it 3 trimorphic? Is because inside of this ray cluster of flowers that tend to be pistillate, there is a pistillate set of tubular flowers that I can't see very well here. Now, I'll say that this, Cronquist in 1980 says the row of tubular radial symmetry types that are inside of the rays may be wanting, a term in botany for mean lacking, on some extraliminal species. Now, to me, that means outside the southeastern U.S. So he's saying if it's in Texas, and maybe it is, that it may not have this extra. I don't see it. I think it's there, but it just doesn't show up. In fact, it was hard enough to find a picture. I went to southeastern Florida and asked for permission and never answered, so I'm using it. They had the best shot that had these the 2-lip tubular flowers that really make it stand out. But so don't be surprised if if you don't find trimorphic in the key, and don't be surprised if you don't find Chaptalia in the key, even though it is in handout number 5, the big, and it's in 2020's version 2. Now, for the second of the unusual head types is the disciform type. Now, granted, I've got this discoid in here for a reason. This discoid would fit in concept number 4 because it's a common type. But the 5th flower head, the second not so common type of head, is called a disciform head. Disciform by design means disc-like. It resembles a disc, but it's not a disc, so it's not common, but it is represented in the genus we've been talking about. This is a western species, Palafoxia arida, but we have Palafoxia integrifolia that was a part of exercise 1 and 2, and the one that's herbaceous and shrubby. Well, in this head, there are the marginal flowers. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead here and show maybe. Okay, discoid is on the left. Discoid head's on the left of my slide I'm looking at now, and disciform is on the right. In the disciform, you have the normal tubular flowers in the center, like this one. They're perfect, and on the margin, you have pistillate flowers in the disciform head. And notice they're slenderer. These filiform pistillate flowers are slenderer, more slender than the ones in the center. So this look-alike thing over here is not the same here. Everything here is tubular and over here and perfect, whereas here we have pistillate, unisexual marginal flowers with the normal perfect ones in the center. So that's a disciform head, and the concept is 5 to 5C on the handout, number 13. So in fact, in the key, you run into it several times. Let's go ahead and look at, let me back out of here.
Hey, Bobby,
Yes,
I have a question.
yes.
I just want to be sure I understand the filiform pistillate flower.
All right, filiform. All
Can
right.
this is what I'm understanding. Is this right?
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
does it have a radially symmetric corolla as well with the 5 lobes like the others? Or is it not a corolla that
I think it's, all right. It's a typical radial symmetry flower. The word, all right, for starters, let's see if the drawing shares that concept too. It doesn't really show it on the left here. This one, see that? What the answer to your question is not obvious. Let's go back to this one though. It is obvious here. This one has tubular flowers with radial symmetry. What they lack, the reason, filiform means slender. And it's slender because it doesn't have any stamens. But the symmetry is the same in this particular genus. The symmetry is the same. In the drawing I just showed you, I didn't see anything. But did that answer your question?
I think so.
Yeah, well,
Thank
bottom
you.
line is that the only difference between this flower and on the periphery and a filiform head and these, well, has to do with the lack of stamens. But it's interesting that this drawing from my friend up in Boone, North Carolina, it doesn't show a corolla at all. So, but the bottom line is that I don't know of any instance in a disciform head when the peripheral flowers have a bilateral symmetry. If they have a corolla, it's going to be like this. It's going to be radial. That ought to answer your question for sure. Now, all right, let's go. Turn to handout number 4 and let's look at the top couplet. All right. In fact, I was fixing to do that. Let me go to it right now. All right. I thought I did. Geez. Now, all right. In fact, see up here in couplet number 3, disciform. This is kind of nice because couplet 3, well, first of all, you remember it could go the shrubby route. We're going to pretend it's perennial and go to the second lead. And then the couplet number 3 says discoid or disciform heads radiate. That's kind of nice. You know why? Because you don't really care if it's this or this. What you care is it's not radiate. Isn't that nice? He did a good job at that. So at this point, Weekly doesn't care if you know the difference between these two. He'll eventually write a glossary, but anyway, right now, you know you know the difference between the two, and so you go to key B. Key B takes us down here, and then I've already told you that the pappus on the handouts exercise, and I mentioned it earlier, maybe or maybe not. The pappus is 10 to 12 scales, and so it would go to the second number 1, not the first. And receptacles naked on the exercise that I gave you. And then you start counting, it's 4 to 12, actually 12, but 4 to 10 scales, not a bristle type of pappus. And then the number 12, if you look at this picture here, there's only 8 or 10 of them in that head. And then this one, so it goes to 10 or 30, not 20 to 125, and takes you to Palafoxia. And you say, well, Bobby, how did you know it was Palafoxia intergrifolia? Well, if you go and Billy's laughing, but for him, it's not true. He's in Florida where he has another species, Fayi. In Georgia, we have intergrifolia and intergrifolia alone. If you go to the biggie handout, the one that's got the 104 pages, you're going to find that there's only one species in Georgia. So Billy's got a problem we don't have down there. Okay, back to this again. I'm thanking you, Lisa, so much for letting us do this. Okay, any questions about this concept and this concept and the next concept are probably the most difficult concepts. But yet the good news is that this is the third uncommon head type. Marshallia is the third uncommon head type. Now, if you were, in fact, let's go with concept wise, it's number 5D on the concept handout. Now, this is Richard's picture, by the way. Beautiful picture. That was on the cover of 2010 Tipulary, I believe. And but anyway, it shows a lot. It's a diagnostic picture. It's not only a pretty picture, but by golly, it's a diagnostic picture. Because look at these spiny things in there. What do you think the heck they are? That's chafe. That's chafe. That's a rough head. Normally you have to rip into a head to find it, but it's rough. They're rough. Okay, now this is fundamentally, this is really a subtype of the discoid head. It's a subtype of the discoid head, but what you got different is these peripheral flowers are not only bigger than the central flowers, but they're bilateral symmetry. And this term, this is funny, Richard knows what I'm laughing about, is I never heard of radiant. I didn't know what it was. I Googled it till I was blue in the face. Couldn't. And I finally, I sent Weekly an email, said, what the heck is radiant and where did I find it? He sent me a University of California, Berkeley handout that gave this definition. A discoid head with a peripheral ring of flowers having much enlarged, often bilateral corollas. Okay, so I learned something in this presentation, and that's one of the things I learned. I did not know it, and he'll have to put it in his glossary. I told him, I'm glad you got it, but I'm sad you got it. And the answer had to do with the similarity of radiant to radiate. Let's see if we can.
Hey, Bobby.
Hang on a minute. Let me type this in first. Okay. All right. Now go ahead. Yeah.
I just want to say all those types are defined really well in the family treatment.
Who's talking?
This is Jason.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jason. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say all those types are defined really well in the Flora of North America treatment online in the family treatment. It gives a good technical definition of each of those types of heads.
Where's that at?
It's on the Flora of North America website.
That link was on the first slide?
Yeah. If you just go search for Asteraceae family, and there's a second paragraph that defines every one of them.
Oh, good. That's good. But I haven't, thank you. Jason has pointed out that link that I didn't have when I started the query of radiant. In fact, that wasn't in that slide when I asked Weekly about that. If I had gone there, I'd have the answer. But that link on the first page is, and glad I got it on the first page, because once you go to the electronic version and type in the word radiant, like I just did here, you're going to get there. So thank you for that. Now, all right, notice in the beginning, the word radiant appears here in Weekly's key. That's the first time I ever noticed it. And then notice it appears here and it appears further down. This is a good time to straighten out a big pun. Let's do it now and get it over with, because this is a biggie, a big omission or on his part. But now notice what's odd about these this is called the key to the keys, this handout. What's missing from here? I've got the answer right in here. F, there is no F. And I asked Weekly about that, and let's go down to to get to F, or FOV, which stands for Flora, Virginia, you got to go to E. That just kind of bothered me, and I tried to hint that if there's anything really that you need to fix, Weekly, it's this, and I wasn't so blunt to him as I am saying it right now. Let's go to key E, and that'll take me to this one first. But then down here at key E, All right, this is about where it would appear. Okay, this is where the F would appear. Ask me where the real F is. Weekly said it's in progress. And meanwhile, he stuck in another F called the Flora Virginia. FOV stands for Flora Virginia. So provisionally, he's got this, which by the way, the Flora Virginia, I hear, I don't have it, is a very fine publication that's finished out. But he stuck the Flora Virginia key in here for F because there is no F. And that's why, but there's still things missing. Now, let's deal with something real quick. Up above, I said, I told you what A was in a nutshell, you know, right? The shrubby things, the viney things. Well, key E can be dealt with in a nutshell, and this is what it is. Key E is nothing but, it's nothing but thistles and milk thistles and their relatives. And they have chafy heads, but the chafe is mostly bristles instead of flat. So it's rough head, not naked. Now, we're on the Marshallia here. There, right? Okay. It just so happens that we're looking at Marshallia right now. Right, see it there? You would have had to gone to key F because they're dealing with alternate flowers. And the receptacle, I already told you, had chafe in it. So you'd go down here and eventually you'd get to Marshallia. Okay, weekly does not say or use radiate head, probably because it is a special type of discoid head, but it applies to Marshallia. He doesn't use it here, but he did use it earlier. But this, and actually here's the sad thing. I emailed him and I said, you know, everybody knows that Centaurea is a radiate head now that you described. We know what radiate head is. In fact, it's sad that this picture is 1975. I didn't know you needed to take close-ups. But anyway, that's a radiate head that's fundamentally similar to that, okay? But
they didn't have close-up lenses back then.
that's the real truth. I didn't have good ones, but all right. Bottom line is that that Centaurea has a radiate head. What we now know what a radiate head is, and if and then Marshallia. I asked Weekly, I said, how come you don't tell that Marshallia has a radiate head? And he, because it clearly fits that definition. It clearly fits the definition that he gave. In fact, and that's this definition here. I said, well, why don't you use, I sent him Richard's picture, this one. And I said, that's a really good example. But he never answered back. Yeah, but I know fundamentally this fits the definition just like that does. All right, now that we're on easy street from here on out. We could take a break or we could keep going. What's the preference?
I need a restroom break. I'll be right back.
Okay, we're gonna have a short restroom break. I tell you what, why don't we just take a 10-minute break, and that'll put us 10 after 12. And then we'll break from the slides and I'll show you an exercise that I was going to save to the end, but it'll break the monotony. So come back at 10 after 12, and I'm not going to disconnect anybody, but go do whatever you got to do and come back, and then we're through with the tough stuff. Okay. So, all right. How about that? I think I'll do that myself. All right, this time is up and we're back. And what I'm going to do is essentially do what I was going to do on the very last slide. The very last slide has a hip dad exercise, and Short practical exercises using the genus Eurybia, Eurbia. Now I'm pulling that off the last slide. And I'm using the Biggie Weekly, that's the 104-page electronic only handout that you've got, okay? Which is the handout number 5. Now, Eurybia is a genus known as the wood asters. The wood asters. Now, there are in Georgia, in the floor of Georgia, and by the way, this cover looks just like the intro. Watch what, but notice that what I've got here is I jumped all the way to page 869. I extracted 104 pages out of Weekly 2017 for Georgia. Now, in last week or the first part of this, in November, he put out the 2020 version of the Biggie and the Georgia extract. But I'm using the 2017. Now, let's go up in the search bar, which is get the search bar and type in Eurybia. And notice that Eurybia appears 29 times in the 104 pages. You see that? All right, the first time it appears is in the key, probably G, let's see. Key G, which you do have in the, you do have that separately in your key to keys, okay? All right, now Eurybia, all right, it appears and notice it double keys in the key G, it double keys, it keys twice, once where the filaries are glandular and once the filaries not glandular. But there are 10 species, let's go to it. Let's go down to, all right, and notice that in the genus Aster, which there is one non-native Tartaricus now in the country, but the rest of the what used to call Asters is in several genera, and that he gives that explanation right here. All of our native species, all right, what he does here, Weekly does a good job. He says all of our native Asters have been now put in other genera, and this Eurybia is one of them. But most of them are in about 17, I forget, I think it's 20, 25 or 6 are put in Symphiatricum, which is a tough name to pronounce. Let's go down to Eurybia. And you see how nice it is to navigate electronically? How'd you like to flip all those pages? No. Now, here's the thing. The question I was going to ask you to do is you look at, well, maybe you're not, I'm doing it for you, which is a bad thing. How many of the 10 species in Georgia are common in Georgia? Okay, how many? All right, and this, I mean, why would you sweat over 10 species if they were not very common? All right, let's go down and look at these 6 species or 10 species. The first 6 are showing here. Now, symbols, you're not as familiar with them, but in the new version, he's going to have them in the footer. So when you have a hollow symbol like that, it means rare, okay? When you have one like in South Carolina here with a square in it with a circle in it, it means uncommon. All right, well here, this species, Eurybia divaricata, is the only species in the 10 in Georgia that's considered uncommon. That one is rare, 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 rare. And how about the other 4? About the other 4? This is hip dad at work, people. It's cheating.
No,
I like it. I like it. Now, uncommon. Okay, I forgot about that. This one is up uncommon in northwest Georgia. The only common Eurybia in Georgia is Paludosa.
Paludosa, yep.
Savannah grassleaf aster. And Eurybia, and it's Eurybia scurriulosa is so rare, it's considered endangered so there's 3 of the species that are uncommon. I think that's a change from the 2000. Okay, I'm still using 2017 though, but anyway, bottom line is that chances are in Georgia, if you find a wood aster that's something that keys out to Eurybia, it's going to be Paludosa. All right, now, any questions before I leave that?
And you're in North Georgia, it would be divaricata.
Yeah, it could be Divericata. Yes. Actually, in North Georgia, look at circulosa. Circulosa is uncommon. Let's go back up and look at Divericata.
We
Thank
have
you,
a
Rick.
we have Hemisphericus here on the prairies too.
All right, okay, and it's showing, and the Hemispherica is listed as rare in coastal plain and rare in up here. But there were three uncommon ones, and Divericata, like Richard says, one of them. All right, considered endangered. During the session, I said that there were 10 species of Eurybia in the 2017 Georgia extract of Weekly. And that group of 10, there are 2 uncommon species and 1 common species, with the other 7 species being rare in Georgia. However, during the editing process, we actually found that in Weekly's new 2020 Georgia extract, he recognizes an additional species of Eurybia, Eurybia spectabilis, which he says is rare in the mountains in Piedmont of Georgia, but he shows it to be also rare in the coastal plain of South Carolina. And lastly, it should be noted that Eurybia paludosa is the only common species of the genus in Georgia, and that one is limited to the coastal plain. All right, so, but unless you're sharp-eyed like Richard, you're not going to see these rare things. So I'm just teasing. But anyhow, all right, so let's, any questions before I leave out of this? All right. I'm going to close all the, actually, I better keep this one open just in case we have to come back to it. Going back to the PowerPoints. And the PowerPoints,
Bobby,
yes, ma'am.
dumb question. How'd you get to that?
How did I get to what, hon?
To the weekly thing?
All right, first of all, all right, her question is how I got to the weekly thing. Now, I sent you 3 weekly products, which is confusing in itself. One that's 12 pages, that's an intro that happened to have that map on the front page. The big one I'm going to pull back up is this one, I think. Okay, that's the that has the same cover as the intro page. But this is the 104 page, the biggest attachment I sent you this week. And this is handout number 5. This hopefully didn't print it out. But the key to that is a 104 page, wait a minute, excuse me. I'm using the big one here, 1080. All right, well, I thought I was pulling up the little one that I sent you. Let's see, this has got to be it here. Oh yeah, there's the one. This is what I just had, was the big version of this, the parent. What I did and sent to you was a 104 page extract out of the big one, out of this one here that has 1,080 pages.
Okay.
You see that? Well, you know
I've got that.
Go back and put this little doodad back in here. Where is it? Spotlight.
Are you able to search through the PDF thing?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
With Adobe, you should be able to do it.
Okay.
And
Something else to learn.
this icon right here should do it for you.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good point. Now, once you learn how to navigate in these Adobe products, your life gets a lot easier.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't make that clear. But now this let me get this thing out of the way. It's not showing on your screen, but this is the 1,080 page document. And I was using the 104 page document, but here I typed in Eurybia, see, and that's how I got there. But, you know, poor old Tom Patrick and I did the same thing. I'm not making fun of him. He printed out the 1,000 and something pages document and ran around with it weekly in a binder. And I did the same thing, and I still got my old one, but I printed that back when Georgia Southern paid for the ink. And so and you know what? I put it on my phone, and it makes it really, I'm surprised how well it does. All right, now we're back to the finishing up of what's left is all downhill. All right, now, but that, it's hard to beat Marshallia for beauty. That Richard Fritcher, this Coosa one's up in Floyd County is something. All right, now, this is a great summary slide. What it lacks, it's missing, this is from Zach Murrell's taxonomy book. It's missing the trimorphic head of Marshallia, and it's missing the radiate head that we just looked at. But the A and B and D are the common ones. I started with a concept 4 on the concept handout. The 5 concepts, concept 5 on the and the A, B, C3 down to 5E types, the uncommon types, they're not here except for this one. So 4 of the 6 are on this handout. Okay, and Lisa asked some really good questions about that too. Now, this involucre morphology, the closest thing, if you look at handout number 8, which I hardly have referred to at all, the overview, all right, this goes down to number 11, and I didn't highlight it on the concept sheet because I ran out of page. I did not want to add another page just to put another concept. However, on down at number 6 concept, I talk about one of the types, which frankly is right here. This is the colliculus, a term that I didn't know what the heck was. And we'll talk more about it. But all right, now a good bit of these slides, the next few slides, come from Richard's 2012 publication, or his workshop that had involucre morphology in it. Okay. This one's got a problem here. My friend Simpson in California has said that it's considered one whorl. That is true here. In other words, studying the collective term for the filaries, involucre, will help you get some mileage in figuring out the aster family. And he says one whorl. I don't buy that. Look here. See the little aristate or pointed bracts at the bottom? So it is a primary one whorl, but that the Senecio, the genus for ragwort, the original genus, has another little set of filaries down here at the base, but it is primarily one big one right there. Now, this one here, we're going to see it twice more in the next few minutes. And it has a name called colliculus that I didn't put here, but well, because we're going to see it in a minute. Before the term colliculus, we just said that the involucre, and the keys would say involucre is biseriate, meaning 2 series, and it would go on to say, if it was a good key, it would go on to say dimorphic, because you're going to see on a better than slide than this, that this whorl of bracts is different from that whorl of bracts. So not only is it separate, but it's dimorphic. It doesn't look alike. This thing here looks, from the west, looks like a hairy helianthus in terms of the bracts being in several series, many whorls, WHORLS, many series of involucral bracts. Now these are bracts that are spiny filaries, and thistles are that way. Milk thistle, this is the milk thistle genus. The veins on the leaves tend to be white, but these are discoid heads, and they have, inside the heads, you have bristles. And so they're not naked heads, receptacles. And when the bracts stand out at right angles and bend out, they call that squarose bracts. So, but that's what you're looking at is key E in a nutshell. Key E in the handout number 4. Now, I'm getting some water. These are Richard slides from 2012. And the one on the right's my good old friend Helianthus, and it's got the bracts, filaries in several whorls, several circular clusters. And that's true, several series. Whereas Helenium sneezeweed has the bracts in 2 to 3 series. It's supposed to be reflex, but I don't bending backwards, but at least they're spreading. Questions? All right, here's that colliculus again. I'll phonetically tell you how to say it in a minute, but the key thing is before the fancy word was there, we used to say, this is Richard's slide, we used to say, again, involucre, biseriate, 2 series, and dimorphic. These, the bracts down here look nothing like these. Now, good old Silphium has some, if you don't know how to practice a modified leaf, this shows it. Because, but they're fewer and bigger in number, or bigger in size in rosin weed, also known as compass plant. Black-eyed Susan has the bracts in several series. They're hairy as can be. And by the way, I forgot that I have a problem. I try to tell you everything I know, and that's not good. But in Harris and Harris, the second part of the book is got sectional by category, and pubescence is one of the categories. And it's the best way to learn pubescence is to look at the key that he has there. But this genus, the genus of black-eyed Susan, which some of them have conical heads, you have to see from the other side, conical receptacles, has bracts in 2 or 3 series, and they tend to be bent backwards, better known as reflexed. Now, these are small. This one-sided inflorescence, S-E-C-U-N-D, means secund, they're one-sided. These heads in goldenrod, in Solidago, illustrate an important concept, and it's called imbricate, I-M-B-R-I-C-A-T-E. It means overlapping, and they are overlapping. In fact, asters, you're going to see in a little before we're done, the Symphyiotricum or former asters are imbricate too, also very, very well imbricate. So more than any slide that we've seen in this invuca morphology, the word imbricate applies here. Finally, the third and last time that we're going to see the Caliculus. Sounds like the ruler in Rome, Caligula. But
Yes, Caligula.
yes. But now, for the first time, you can see very well the bracts are in 2 series and they're dimorphic. So now let's pick up, maybe for the last time. You'll be glad, I'm sure. Let's go to handout number 4. And if I, let's see, if I told you that the leaves in Coreopsis, which is what this is, tick seed, are opposite, and the head is radiate, if you turn it over to the other side, there's disc flowers. If I told you those two, look at key 4 and then run through it for the last time. All right. Okay, I'll let that ring. All right, now, all right, plant or they're herbs, so you go to second number 1 on page 1. The leaves are opposite, so you drop down to the couplet 3. Heads radiate, I just told you that. Key C. Now, we go to key C. Herbaceous composites with opposite leaves and radiate heads. All right, involucre of filarius extended by a caliculus of bracts. Wow, you already know. And by the way, that's on the concept handout number 13. I'm jumping around. Number 6. So, and actually you need that right next to it. I've got, it actually appears in couplet 29, I think, too. Well, maybe, anyway, it appears again in the keys. But all right, caliculus is at the top of key C, and involucre headed by a caliculus, and then you drop down to that number 1, not the second one. And I did not do it, but I should have, on concept 3A, I should have circled the couplet number 2, Cypselus beaked and beakless. Back at on 3A on the handout 13, I should have added this couplet number 2, but it's I have it, but I just don't have it circled. Okay, all right, now because we're talking about caliculus now, this slide that we're working with is Coreopsis, right? And look at this, and even on the slide I tell you this: Bidens and Cosmos. Cosmos is a non-native that the DOT plants here and there, but there it is. Now the Cypsela is beaked in Cosmos and not beaked in the other 2. These are closer together, harder to tell by some people, but Now, all right, just put this in your pipe and smoke it. Think about it a little bit before we're done. We're going to go over two terms that haven't appeared anywhere else: antorse and retorse barbs. All right. All right. So we got somebody jumping in the back. Oh, I thought it was, I saw something going up and down in the back of Lisa's slide. It was funny, but I won't tell you what I thought it was. But anyhow, antorse and retorse barbed is something we're going to show in a little bit. So I'm through with this for the last time, I think. So let me get out of that and go back to the PowerPoint. And I'm sorry about that diversion, but all right. Here we go. All right. Now, this is Chaptalia, the trimorphic head. Cronquist describes its color as anthocyanic color, which basically is talking about the color in beets, a water-soluble pigment. I don't think it's that widespread in the genus or in the family. In the keys, they'll sometimes say Corolla's anthocyanic, which means that they tend to have this color in depending on what age they're in. But in Chaptalia and the basal leaves, nobody ever looks, but there's this, the name tomentose comes in handy, which is, by the way, that's that trick I was telling you about in Harris and Harris is on page 166. In the Harris and Harris, there's a key to pubescence. And tomentose is one of the real woolly booger types of hairs, is what you see in that plant. But if you didn't know what imbricate means, now you do. They're overlapping. Okay. Now that's the last of the involucral concepts. And now we're going to move to this concept 7 on the handout number 13. Concept 7 has to do with the capillary bristles. And there's basically three possibilities. There's the capillary bristles that are simple, capillary bristles that have little barbs on them called barbellate, and the capillary bristles that are plumose or feathery. And this distinction is in some of the liatrices and some of the hawkweeds. You need to know these kind of bristle separations. Without a lens, though, you'd be hard pressed to see these. So there's three basic options: simple, barbellate, not so common. Plumose is probably a little more common in terms of capillary bristles. Now, what we're saying is the pappus, which is modified in the form of capillary bristles and the two subtypes. Now, the Cypsella is, I'm not going to go over that again, but Weekly uses it in the key, even though we loosely call them achenes. This is probably blanket flower Gaillardia. It has awns with little bitty thin wings on them. So that calyx is modified. Pericarp is just a fancy term for the fruit in an angiosperm, okay? If you looked at Harris and Harris, that would clear that up. It's just a term for the wall of on the achene or Cypsella. Now, notice the pappus here he has awns like Richard Nixon, and it has scales down here. And that's kind of what you got in this false aster Boltonium. Now, all right, back in the goldenrod slide of Richards, I showed you imbricate bracts. Well, in the asters, that's what you got here too. All right, this is now in the genus, these two are in the genus Symphiatricum. Symphiatricum. And CH is K. There is no church in biology. Okay, CH is K, Symphiatricum. K sounds like a hard K. Now, Boltonia is notorious for looking, you think it's an aster. The involucre is a little bit imbricate, but not nearly the honeycomb imbricate pattern we have down here, or in Solidago for that matter. But there's a little bit of overlapping going on, but it's different. But the most different thing, well, y'all tell me, does anybody, some of you know, I know Richard has to be quiet, I know he knows, the capillary, oh, I done told it. The pappus in here is capillary bristles. The pappus here is that, looks like this, sort of, when it's older. has 2 awns and some bristles. So a false aster Boltonia is not only a difference of an involucre, it's a difference of the pappus. So what I'm essentially saying, Boltonia is a lookalike. You can see though why it's called false aster. All right, now, okay. Remember a few minutes back we had in the key, in fact, we were wrestling with this right here, Bidens and Cosmos, Bidens and Coreopsis. Okay, now here we're dealing with Bidens. Bidens has the, what they call retorse barbs. In fact, if you don't know what beggar's ticks are, go outside and go through the woods and you'll get covered with some of these things. This is, these are, retorse means, if you look in the glossaries, it'll tell you pointed downward, which is what they say about bidens, retorse barbs. But antorse, the trouble with Coreopsis, there can be no barbs or antorse. So if this Coreopsis, they would be pointed up and or none. Okay, so that's where you run into those traits. That couplet, it doesn't appear often. All right, there's a good drawing of the same thing, retorse. In fact, this is from Zach Norell's textbook. It's an excellent summary of the kind of pappus variations you have. The far right is E pappos. E means not. There is none. Over here, the keen or sepsella is almost hidden by the bristles. Okay. Here, this is a beak to a keen, and they're plumose capillary bristles. This C and D and E are a lot in common. They have a crown of scales, but the crown is low here. The crown is deciduous here and persistent here, and the crown is very prominent here. And then we have bidens, and then we have the E pappos that's in the minority. I think that would be typical of Eclipta, what used to be called Eclipta. I forget what it's called now, the genus. But now we're if you're lost, we are down, we're getting near the end. We're down to number 14 on the overview slide handout 8. And on the concept sheet, we're on the last 2 items, 8A and 8B. 8A, all right. What's the norm sexuality in a radiate head? A rhetorical question. I'm not expecting you to answer it. The norm is to have these fertile and the peripherals will be pistillate. In Silphium and Berlandiera, the genus the green eyes genus that Billy mentioned, and a few others, they tend to be different. What happens is the ray flowers are pistillate, perfect, and the disc flowers, by the way, this is a rough head, it's chafy. So it illustrates chafy head, and it illustrates the opposite from the norm, and the opposite being the ray flowers are fertile and the disc flowers are what? Sterile. All right, now, so here's a drawing from Small that shows the akene. By the way, it's got a wing on it, but it shows that these central flowers are like this. There is no 2 stigmas sticking up. There's no pistils at all. There's only pollen, staminate. Now, when you actually see it, you say, oh, look, that's wrong. There's 2 stigmas, that's normal. No, this is 2, these are from 2 separate flowers. Every flower has only 1 structure sticking up, and it's just stamens. All right, now you can see the pales in here too, the pales. In Silphium. Silphium is rosinweed, also known as compass plant. There's some that are like that. Now, by the way, I want you to concentrate on this in the drawing, and then this same thing in the actual picture.
Yep.
Okay, so what you've got is you see that when you see the Playboy bunny sticking up, or Richard Nixon, or whatever you want to call it, the 2 stigmas, that tells you that's a fertile flower. And by the way, look at this. See that? That's a fat, young akene developing. Over in the center, they're sterile. They're not going to develop. There's no ovary, but this ovary is maturing already. Yeah. So the oddity here is that on the periphery of this head, you have fertile florets that produce seeds, and the interior is sterile. That's totally backwards from what the norm is. All right. And if you can't appreciate what the pale looks like, I drew one here to stick in. The general shape of the pale is, we've been talking about all along, is somewhat diamond shaped. All right, now, I already showed how rough this is. Okay, you can see the roughness of rosinweed there. Now, this slide is a summary slide you can look at later. This slide is a summary slide of the pappus types you can look at later. It came from Andy Kluhl's book. I think this one, I'm not sure if this one did or not. Now, we're almost done, so hang tight. Let me get to that part. Thank goodness for Lisa saving the day. All right. Some of you work on a limited budget and don't have unlimited money to spend, but what you don't want you to do is go to Carolina Biological or Ward's or some catalog place and buy some cheap piece of junk that for $1,200 that won't do much good. I've got that. And this is the newer version of it, L3, and I've got the L2. If you put that into Google search engine, you'll find one or both. And I don't like eBay that much, but if I had to buy one, I'd buy it on eBay. 99 to 125, 99 for this, 125 for that. Now, they're made by Bosch and Lohm, who don't make these kind of things anymore, as far as I know. But they're products that last. I paid $400 in the 1980s for mine. And you can buy this for 99 or maybe 125. I don't know if it's what kind of condition it's in, but you could find out. But what's the value of it is that knob right here. That knob is a Zoom, just like the programmer on Zoom. And it really, if you got that, one of the hard things on not just composites is these tiny dang little flowers that you just can't see. Once you have this, you wonder how you did without it. These are about $6 or $8 a piece. You need 2 of them, and to save them, you need to stick them in styrofoam or cork. Is Maylee still with us? Probably not. Okay. Yeah.
I am.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Anyhow. All right. Well, she's got, she showed me, she had one of these 10X, actually it's 40X, I think. I got one. And I wished, and not blaming her, but I should have paid more attention. I would have liked to have gotten a lighted version that was 10X. A lighted 40 is good for magnifying, but you have to be steady when you hold them. But there's a lighted version of this and a not lighted version of that. And in a minute, I'll show you about how to use them and how not to use them. But a good one of these is important, and one like Maylee's got that goes, I think hers is probably 40X, is good, and it's got a light, and it's really handy. The cheapest thing on here is these dissecting needles. You could get them at a supply house. But anyway, if you can squeeze it, if you can get for Christmas or get you one of these, boy, you'll go a long way, especially with that zoom. Because the ones that cost a lot of money and aren't as good have click options for zooming. All right, let's see if I've covered everything. Any questions about that? If you're working with herbarium specimens, you need one of these on a radial arm that sticks out. So those aren't good for herbarium specimens because something that's mounted in the middle of a sheet won't fit. All right, now tools, books, and pamphlets. Roger Hammer is a friend of mine in South Florida who's emailing me a minute ago, says, and he's right, regional floras are better than national floras. The closer something you can get that's for your region and nowhere else to narrow the field of choices is always good. Now, I think it's on the handout email that I sent y'all. Let's see if I can find it. Here it is. The last email. I mentioned this to those in the beginning, and everybody may not, at least them that came on 10 may not have heard me. The handout I sent you yesterday has item number 8, and item 8 lists the hard copy pamphlets and books that have distribution, like 1988 Coyle and Jones and Coyle, and 1984 Marine Mellinger. They are dated, but they still give hard copy looks at what species distribution is in Florida and Georgia. Now, all right, make sure you know how to use a lens. All right, by the way, books would be like the ones I started with on slide 2, those little cheap, little weed cup picture books. They're some of the few picture books I own, but they're good. All right, now, let's see if you can see me do this. All right, here's how not to use a hand lens. Don't see how far my head is from my hands? That's a no.
Oh, God.
A no-no. Here's what you do. You get it up here, and if you got a big chest or fat boy like me, you got something to rest your arms on. But you get up here and you fill the frame with your eye so that there's nothing, you don't have peripheral stuff. And then you start moving your fingers apart, your hands apart until you get the right sharpness. And the higher the magnification, the more steady you got to be. But I wouldn't recommend any higher than 10x, but if you could have a higher one mag, but used for using in details like those antorse and retorse barbs. Here's the key, folks. Even with 10x, if you get the right light, you can do a lot. And by the way, those scopes I showed you had good light sources. My bulb lasted for 40 years.
Wow.
I just bought bulbs the other day, finally.
Wow.
All right, now, in fact, if you buy one and need a bulb, I can give you one. All right, because they sent me 4 of them. All right, I'm not going to live long enough to use others. Measuring device is always a good thing. Clippers, good things. Knife. Hip Dad is a tool that I preached about, not because I wrote it, but because it works. And then, all right. Oh, okay. I've done this today already. UGA, Bonap, and Cernak, and I did Cernak at the break. Now, I made it, if you didn't, I gave a whole session to Ellen Honeycutt and a few others the other day on Cernak. And a short 30-minute session. USF is a good place. FSU down there, we're closer to Billy and Marcia, is a good, really good. I could show you how to, you can make a lot of hay with FSU because of the way it's arranged. I can show somebody in a private Zoom if you want to, how quick and fast and how useful it is. Internet tools, there are tons of them, but USDA is outdated, but it's still useful. You saw me a while ago, and for some states, it's better than others. Now, plant analysis. This is common sense, but common sense isn't so common anymore, is it? Here's a funny, a friend of mine, this is why I've got 4 steps instead of 3. Person was teaching dendrology. I hate it because it's memorization. Teaching a dendrology course over at Geechee Tech near here, Statesboro, and he showed me, they brought me over and showed him this plant. He couldn't figure out what it is. The problem was he was looking at a shrub that if he'd have looked 10 feet further, he'd have seen a tree. You don't always stop at the first plant you see. And if you hang out in parks, you got a problem. The problem is they'll weed whack and mow stuff on the trail.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks odd, especially oaks. And here's a good natural example is basswood. If you mess with the basal leaves of a sucker on a basswood with 3 times its size, you're not looking at a typical leaf. So make sure you've got a normal subject before you proceed. Now, then you do plant analysis, which I use this 1-page handout in general, but what I've done on the next slide is generated a plant analysis handout exclusively for a composite, okay? Actually, 2 slides over. Now, and so profile, this is a good book, by the way. I can't find my copy, but the 6th edition of Botany in a Day is an excellent little book if you've not had a formal course in botany. And speaking of that, I didn't get much, I didn't get anybody, I sent out in the newsletter about trying to find out if anybody's interested in little Zoom sessions. they probably heard about this one and are scared. So no, the last week folks really liked it, and if it hadn't been for Lisa, we'd have been messed up. All right. Anyway, botany is a rare subject anywhere. You can't get, that's a whole nother topic. Profiling your plant is the same thing as profiling your plant is plant analysis. And people are keying the plant. We'll talk about that in a second. That's hard. I know a lot of geniuses that can't key squat. And I'll tell you why. Then do the post. What do you do if you don't have an expert? You do HipDad. Okay. Now, humans can't multitask. The better job you do of plant analysis, the better off you key. Now, the best keyer I know is Carmel Van Hook down in Tampa. She's a self-taught botanist, and she's a psychiatric nurse. She's elderly, and she worked for me, a volunteer, when I was in Florida. That woman could key anything, and usually you do it in pairs. Because that one person does the plant analysis, one person reads the key, because can't seem to, they lose their place, back and forth, back and forth. So the better plant analysis you do, the less looking and back and forth you're going to have to do. So if the third person is available, let them do the glossary. But a two-person team is good. But now, what does plant analysis for an Asteraceae look like? It looks like this. This is what we've been talking about all morning. And concept one, this I didn't put in the concept because it's pretty simple. Leaf phyllotaxy arrangement is usually the lower nodes are more accurate than the upper nodes. And a node is a place on a plant where leaves appear. That's what a node is. That was in the matching. Head type, there's 3 main types and 3 others I showed you. The 3 others are disciform, radiate, and trimorphic. All right, and then down here, okay, we spent a lot of time with this, and actually I mentioned the conical heads. Pappus type, that's the tart, all the way from no pappus to bristles to scales to awns. Then we went into Silphium, Berlandier, and a few others are like this. They don't have the normal configuration. Normal is what? Fertile disc, pistillate ray. Now, the only reason I threw this slide in is I haven't talked about these two, and I won't. But up here, and the reason I highlighted is that drawing looks to me almost like barbolate. This is, I might have got this from Richard that he used in 2012, but it caught my eye that this looks, if you go back and look at the photograph of the slide, it looks more like barbolate.
Yep.
Almost would be longer. That's simple bristles right there. So 2 of the 3 I showed you are here. And all right, HipDad, we talked about the first one, illustrations, phenology is flowering time. Phenology, if you're looking for gentians in the spring, you're wasting your time, people. Because there are members of the family that flower early, but they're generally late. Even Sabatias tend to be late. District of range, a person down here was photographing, speaking of Sabatia, they were photographing Sabatia on the Altamaha River area, and they were trying to call it capitata, which is, I think, up in Richard's area, Sabatia capitata, and he didn't even bother looking at the distribution or range, or even, he was looking at an odd flower color, and he never bothered with that, or a habitat, which is the first one. Now, again, I talked about this, that if you think you found a rare plant, especially on the roadside, chances are you have it. I said that Roelia noctiflora, the night blooming petunia, is an exception. Diagnosis, inscription, diagnosis doesn't give a complete, but a good description, like in the vascular flora of the Carolinas, 1968, that covers all these others. The trouble is they're rare. Nobody has lived long enough to produce a flora of Georgia except for Weekly. Wilbur Duncan was tried, but he died. All right, now we've done that, and that's really it, people. That's we're done. Any questions at all?
Beautiful. Well done, Bobby.
Well, it's a heck of a lot longer. It's 1 o'clock and we started at 9:30. So, but if it hadn't been for Lisa, we'd have been screwed. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa.
All right. So,
Thank you.
Veronica,
so- all right.
Take a picture. You know, one of the big things, Bobby, that I even try to tell people that are running, do herbariums, take a picture, either with your cell phone now,
Go ahead, Billy.
close-ups of what you got, and that is fabulous.
What was?
No, taking a picture is so
Oh, yeah,
important,
yeah.
and it can be vouchered. If you
Yeah.
can't get the plant, it's a lot easier to take multiple pictures of everything
Yeah.
we've talked about.
Yeah.
Can be
Well, here-
vouchered, and it can go along with the herbarium sheet to show you what it looked like before it's dried.
Well, Billy, when this is over sometime in the future, I'm going to send you a white paper that I wrote. And the white paper was a plea for the Botanical Society. Then Ellen Honeycutt and a couple of people answered, but nobody else. What you're actually talking about, where you realize it or not, is Discover Life. I'm not pushing that website because I have the album, but what that is a documentation. I got weekly, and all of the herbarium taxonomists don't want me to do that because it means that people won't collect. I mean, but the trouble is, you just said it. We can't afford to go collect everything willy-nilly. What I've done or tried to do, and I get on my high horse here, I've documented over 2,000 species, not all in Georgia, of plants and their locations. And the herbarium people could go to there and collect them. But see, not nobody. Well, the reason most photographs, and Richard, I know I was harped about this, the good photograph is great, but a diagnostic photograph
Yes.
is much better. And Alan Kressler takes beautiful pictures. In Linda's book, most of her pictures are his, but he takes close-ups that aren't necessarily diagnostic. They're aesthetically beautiful, but they're not useful. I got after Roger Hammer, but he won't change, and probably
I know.
they won't change.
Poor Roger.
I love Roger. In fact, I email him. He emails me every day about something, but it's usually not botany. But anyhow, the point is, I can't get him to. I've not talked to Kressler, and they probably hurt his feelings. But his are beautiful pictures, but they're so close up you can't see the stipules on Rubiaceae that you need to see. The interpetiolar stipules. That picture that Richard showed you on the Marshallia that had the chafy head, that's great. That's a diagnostic picture. But what Billy is essentially saying is good photographs, especially if you have a GPS location, will help collectors to find the plants and collect them. Now, that's what I do not do on a rare plant is I do not show the coordinates.
Right.
Do not show the coordinates because you know what's going to happen. They're going to be destroyed. In Texas, they used to, you tell a rare plant owner, you tell a guy that's got a rare plant on his property, he destroys it.
Florida. Yeah.
Yeah, Florida, same thing. But I used to work for Florida Natural Areas Inventory, and private landowners, if they think they got a rare plant and the government may screw with them, they'll destroy them. I hate to say it, but that's ignorance, plain and simple. All right, people. Any other comments? Y'all were wonderful, wonderful patient. I don't know if I would have been that patient.
I just like to say, this was a great breakdown of the complicated terminology, and I really like the photograph examples showing the comparisons.
Yes.
You can't get that and otherwise unless you key out a bunch of plants and try and figure it out. It's really hard
Right.
on your own.
And who's got time to do
That was
that?
really useful. Unless you're in grad school, right?
Yeah, now let me tell you something. About this keying. It took me a long time to realize that I was born in 1948, and a guy named Herbert Zim made this statement in 1948. He was the father of all these little golden guys. including the one that I showed you on weeds. He said in keying out 50 plants, you mistakenly keyed out 50 more. And you'll, in a few hours or a few days later, you'll find that other plant, and you won't. So it's exponential growth curve. If you can endure keying for a little while, you'll start cheating. Oh, I saw that. You don't even read the couplet. You just keep going. And that's the way pretty soon, if you keep it up, you'll exponentially grow. But the trouble with picture books is that you have people will look at these pictures and they're not making any connections about where that plant fits in the scheme. I don't memorize a thing, but I learn by keying, and that's conceptually the way to learn. Okay, all right. Well, I couldn't ask for a better bunch. So, Steve, you still there? They're still there. They're still there.
Still here.
Okay, so we got let's see, we got 1, 2, 3. We still got most of everybody, if not everybody. I appreciate it, and I joked about Richard and Mincy not learning much, but maybe they learned something. They learned not to do another one of these with Bobby.
Thank you, Bobby. I sure appreciate it. And
All right, Ed.
I'll send you an email.
Okay.
Nice seeing you again, Ed.
What's
Thank
that?
you, Bobby.
You're welcome.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Bobby.
Thanks.
Gonna
Good to
cut her
see you.
loose.
Bye-bye.
All
Goodbye.
righty. I'm gonna bye-bye.
Take care.
Maybe
Bye-bye.
all
Get-
right, folks.
Get well, Bobby.
I will. Well, I will. I'm gonna stop the sharing.